They dragged Mary, a pregnant woman, to the dark side of the stream. Forced her to drink from water no one touched. 3 nights later, she screamed in labor. The midwife ran out, her face pale as chalk. In her hands wasn't a baby, but a yam shaped like a goat. The village called her cursed and threw her into the forest to die. Welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and also share with your friends. Now back to the story. The rooster had just crowed when the first whispers started. It was the kind of whisper that traveled faster than wind, from one compound to the next, from the women at the grinding stone to the old men under the mango tree. Mary's belly. It's too big. That's not normal. I heard her husband went to the city and hasn't sent word for months. Who knows what she's been doing? Don't you remember? Her mother's people were accused of witchcraft long ago. By the time the sun's rim showed above the hills, the whispers had turned to open accusation. Mary was on her way to the stream, a clay pot balanced on her head, when she noticed the change in the air. Normally, people greeted her. Today, the women pounding yams stopped mid-swing to watch her. A man sharpening his cutlass stared openly, his lips curling. Children, who usually ran to touch her belly, now hid behind their mothers. At first, she kept walking, telling herself it was her imagination. But then a voice rang out, sharp and clear. She is the reason the rains are late. Mary stopped. Another voice answered, and since she came back from her father's farm, goats have been dying. She is a witch, an old man declared, spitting on the ground. Let her drink from the dark side of the stream. The crowd murmured in agreement. Mary's heart pounded. Everyone knew the meaning of that sentence. The stream that ran along the edge of the village had 2 sides. The clear side, where women washed clothes and children played, and the dark side, where trees blocked the sun and the water was cold and green. It was said that if a witch drank from there, the spirits would expose her. No one ever came back the same after being made to drink from that side. Some lost their minds, some became sick until they died. Before she could speak, the chief's guards appeared, spears in hand. Mary, one said, his face like stone, you will come with us. She tried to explain, her voice trembling. I have done nothing wrong. I am carrying my husband's child. I have never harmed anyone. They didn't answer. The guards gripped her arms and marched her toward the stream. Her pot fell and cracked on the ground, spilling water into the dust. The village followed, some walking quickly to keep up, others lingering behind to watch. Whispers became chants. Let her drink. Let the spirits judge her. When they reached the stream, Mary's legs felt like they no longer belonged to her. The clear side rippled with sunlight, but they pushed her toward the shadows. The dark side was silent, except for the slow drip of water from a leaning branch. The elders stood in a half-circle. Elder John, tallest among them, stepped forward. His eyes were sharp as a hawk's. Mary, he said, the village accuses you of witchcraft. If you are innocent, the water will leave you unharmed. If you are guilty, the spirits will act. Kneel. Mary's knees hit the wet ground. She wanted to run, but the guards' hands were on her shoulders. She could feel the stares of the crowd, stares that had already judged her guilty. Elder John gestured. Drink. Her hands shook as she cupped the cold, green water. The smell of damp earth rose into her nose. She took a mouthful and swallowed. The water was bitter, almost metallic. When she looked up, Elder John's expression didn't change. The villagers stared, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Take her home, Elder John finally said. We will see in the coming days if she spoke the truth. Mary was released, but not truly free. Everywhere she walked, eyes followed her. Some mothers pulled their children away. Men who had once smiled now looked through her as if she didn't exist. 3 nights later, it began. A deep, twisting pain in her belly woke her from sleep. She clutched her stomach, gasping for air. The pain came in waves, sharper each time. Sweat drenched her wrapper. Her neighbor, hearing her screams, ran to fetch the midwife. When the midwife arrived, she told Mary to push. The pain grew unbearable, her cries echoing through the village. Then she heard the midwife gasp. "What is this?" the midwife whispered, stepping back. Mary looked down, and froze. Lying in the midwife's trembling hands was not a baby. It was a yam. A large, pale brown yam, shaped strangely like a curled goat. Before Mary could speak, the midwife dropped it to the floor. Her scream tore through the night. "Witch! She has given birth to a cursed thing." People rushed in. The yam was held up for all to see. Gasps, shouts, and the old, familiar chant rose again. "She will destroy us all. She must leave now." The yam was taken and thrown into the fire. Mary was dragged outside, her legs barely holding her weight. The chief appeared, his face grim. "Mary, you are no longer welcome here. You will leave this village before sunrise. If you remain, you will be tied to the Iroko tree for the spirits to take you." Her neighbor tried to speak up for her but was silenced with a glare. Mary gathered what little she had, a wrapper, a calabash of water, and the cloth she had wrapped around the yam before they took it away. She walked out of the village with no destination, the sound of the crackling fire behind her. The forest swallowed her. The ground was uneven, roots grabbing at her feet. The calls of night creatures filled the air. The moonlight broke through in patches, lighting her path just enough to see. Hours passed. Her legs felt like wood, her body cold with exhaustion. Finally, she found a small clearing. She gathered dry sticks, striking 2 stones until a spark caught. The flames rose weakly, but it was enough to keep the shadows back. She sat with her knees to her chest, the firelight flickering across her face. The loneliness pressed on her like a heavy blanket. Then she heard it, a branch snapping, slow footsteps in the dark. Her heart leapt to her throat. She grabbed a stone from the ground, holding it tight. The footsteps stopped just beyond the firelight. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. Silence. Then a deep voice answered, calm but wary. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you." A tall man stepped into the light. He wore a simple leather tunic, a bow slung across his back, a quiver full of arrows. His eyes scanned her quickly, her swollen feet, her tear-streaked face. "What are you doing out here alone at night?" he asked. Mary didn't answer at first. She didn't know if this stranger was a savior or another threat. The man shifted his bow to his side, his tone softening. "My name is Daniel. I hunt in these parts. You shouldn't be here alone. The forest can be dangerous." Mary stared at him, the stone still in her hand. She had learned too quickly that trusting the wrong person could destroy you. Daniel crouched by the fire, warming his hands. "You don't have to tell me your story tonight," he said, looking into the flames. "But I have a hut not far from here. It's safer than sleeping under the open sky." Mary's mind raced. Stay here, exposed to wild animals and who knew what else, or follow a stranger into the unknown. She looked into the fire, then up at him. "I'll follow," she said quietly. And with that, the night that had begun with exile ended with the first step towards something she could not yet name, and someone who would change her life forever. The forest seemed different with Daniel leading the way. His steps were steady, almost silent, as if the earth itself made room for him. Mary walked behind, her wrapper gathered tight against the cold. The firelight from the clearing had faded, replaced by the silver glow of the moon slipping between branches. They walked for almost half an hour before Daniel stopped in front of a small hut made of mud walls and a thatched roof. A small fence of woven sticks surrounded it. "This is where I stay," Daniel said, pushing the gate open. Inside, the space was simple. A sleeping mat in one corner, a low wooden stool, and bundles of dried meat hanging from the rafters. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, mixed with the earthy scent of the walls. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "I'll keep watch." Mary lowered herself onto the mat, exhaustion weighing her down. She hadn't realized how tired she was until her body gave in. Daniel lit a small fire in the corner and began roasting a piece of meat. The crackle and hiss of fat dripping into the flames filled the silence. Mary watched him, unsure. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel glanced at her but didn't stop turning the meat. Because you look like someone who's been hunted enough. The words caught her off guard. Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away. She had cried enough in the last 3 days. He handed her the roasted meat and a small calabash of water. She ate slowly, her stomach still weak from the pain of the past days. They didn't talk much that night. Daniel lay near the doorway with his bow beside him, keeping watch while Mary curled up on the mat. The days that followed were quiet but not lonely. Daniel left at dawn to hunt and returned before nightfall with rabbits, bush rats, or the occasional antelope. Mary began helping him, cleaning the meat, boiling herbs, and mending the little fence around the hut. She found herself planting small crops on a patch of cleared ground beside the hut. Maize, beans, and one yam Daniel had traded for in the next village. She pressed it into the soil gently, almost protectively. Daniel noticed but didn't comment. Sometimes, in the evenings, they would sit outside and listen to the forest. The rustle of leaves, the far-off cry of hyenas, the whistle of night birds. Daniel wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, his voice was steady, like a drumbeat you could trust. It was 2 weeks before Mary told him what had happened. They were sitting by the fire when Daniel said, "You still haven't told me why you were out there that night." Mary's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. She stared into the fire. "They said I was a witch," she said finally. Daniel's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. "They made me drink from the dark side of the stream. 3 days later, I went into labor, but I didn't give birth to a child." Her voice cracked. "It was a yam. They burned it. Then they threw me out." Daniel studied her face. There was no madness in her eyes, no sly smile of someone hiding secrets. Only exhaustion and pain. "I believe you," he said. Mary looked up sharply. "Just like that?" "Yes. I've seen what fear does to people. It makes them believe lies if those lies make them feel safe." She didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to her like that in months. As the moon waxed and waned, something unspoken began to grow between them. Daniel would return from the forest and find Mary waiting with food ready. Mary would wake in the night and see him adding logs to the fire so she wouldn't be cold. One rainy evening, the roof leaked. They sat close together, shoulders touching, under the driest corner of the hut. The sound of rain drumming on the thatch wrapped around them like a blanket. Daniel turned to her. "You don't have to go back to that village, Mary. You can make a life here." Her chest tightened. No one had offered her a place before, not without conditions. She nodded slowly. "I want to stay." A season passed, and with it came change. The crops Mary planted began to sprout. Daniel built a stronger fence and repaired the roof. They started trading meat and maize at nearby villages, and in return, Mary got cloth and spices. One evening, Daniel returned from the hunt with a smile. "I went to the elder in the next village. He agreed to bless our union." Mary's mouth fell open. "You mean marriage?" Daniel nodded. "If you want it." Her answer was simple. "Yes." They married in a quiet ceremony under a tall kola tree, with only the village elder and 2 children as witnesses. There were no drums, no dancing, but for Mary, it was more than she had ever dreamed she would have again. Months later, Mary felt the first signs. This time, there was no fear of midwives or whispers. Daniel stayed by her side through the night. When the cries of a newborn filled the hut, Mary wept, not from pain, but from relief. She held her son close, his tiny fingers curling around hers. They named him David. From the start, David was different. At just 4 years old, he could carry a bundle of firewood that would have tired a grown man. His features were striking, sharp cheekbones, bright eyes, skin smooth like polished ebony. When they took him to nearby villages, people turned to look. Mothers whispered to their daughters. Men watched with curiosity. By the time David was 10, the stories had started again, not of curses, but of wonder. They say the hunter's son can carry a whole goat on his shoulders. They say no one can beat him in a race. Have you seen his face? He could be a prince. The whispers reached farther than the forest. They reached Mary's old village. And there, among the familiar mud walls and iroko tree, the same elders who had driven her out now sat in a meeting, their voices low but urgent. Elder John spoke first. If the boy is as strong as they say, he could serve in the warrior clan. We must bring him here. But will the mother return? Another elder asked. If she does, Elder John said, then we will speak of the past differently. Back in the forest, Mary watched David practice lifting logs by the hut. The evening sun painted the sky orange. She didn't know that, even as she smiled, men from her old village were already making their way through the forest, coming for her son. The morning was still, the kind of stillness that makes birds delay their songs. Mary was preparing a pot of maize porridge when Daniel returned from the forest earlier than usual. His steps were quick, his face tense. There are men on the old trail, he said quietly. They are from your village. Mary froze, the wooden spoon in her hand trembling. What do they want? Daniel's gaze shifted toward the hut where David was still sleeping. I don't know, but I think it's about him. By midday, they appeared, 3 men, all wearing the same patterned cloth of her old village. One carried a spear, the other 2 had machetes strapped to their waists. They stopped at the fence, not stepping inside. Elder John was not among them, but the tallest of the men spoke with authority. We come with a message from the council. The boy, David, his strength is known across the land. Our warrior clan wishes to train him. Mary's jaw tightened. And if I say no? The man shrugged. The chief will not be pleased. But perhaps, it is time you returned. The past can be forgotten. Mary almost laughed. Forgotten? The nights she had slept on the cold forest floor, the stairs, the chants of which, these were not things that could be erased with a few soft words. Daniel stepped forward. David stays here. He's my son. The man's expression didn't change. Think carefully. The clan could make him powerful. And your name, it could be cleared. When they left, their words hung in the air like smoke. David, who had been listening from inside, came out. Is it true? They want me to join their warriors. Mary touched his face. Yes, but you don't know the things they did to me. David's eyes searched hers. I want to see where you came from. I want to know why they did it. Daniel looked at Mary, and she knew. This was not a decision they could make for him. The next morning, the 3 of them set out toward the village she had once called home. The path was both familiar and strange. She remembered where the mango tree bent low over the stream, where the red earth stained your feet for days, but every step felt like walking deeper into a place she had left in another lifetime. When they reached the entrance, people stopped what they were doing. Eyes widened, voices whispered, and soon a crowd formed. Some faces looked exactly as she remembered, older now, lined with years, while others were new. Elder John came forward, leaning on a carved walking stick. His voice was slow but still carried weight. Mary, welcome home. She stared at him. This was never my home after what you did. There was a murmur from the crowd. Elder John's mouth tightened. I regret what happened. We all do. But you must understand, there were signs. The goats dying, the late rains. You made me drink from the stream, she said, her voice rising. You called me a witch. You burned what I gave birth to. And you threw me into the forest to die. Before Elder John could answer, a younger elder stepped forward. His face was pale, his hands fidgeting. Mary, it's time you know the truth. That day, you were not the one the spirits wanted tested. But someone in the council had other plans. Mary's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The man swallowed hard. There was a woman in the village. She wanted Daniel for herself, before he left for the forest. She knew he had been kind to you in the past. She told the elders you were cursed. I was there when she said it. I said nothing. I was a coward. The crowd stirred. A few people looked at each other, shame in their eyes. Elder John's face was like stone. These are dangerous claims, he said. The younger elder went on. The yam you gave birth to, The midwife told us later it was a rare sickness. The child had died in the womb, and your body formed something else in its place. But the story of the goat-shaped yam was easier for people to believe. It made them afraid. And fear is easier to control than truth. Mary felt her knees weaken. For years she had carried the weight of their judgment, their lies eating at her like termites in wood. And all along, the truth had been hidden. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "We can leave now," he said. But Mary shook her head. "No. I need to finish this." She turned to the crowd. "You feared me because it was easier than standing up for me. You told yourselves stories to justify your cruelty. You taught your children to be afraid of me before they even knew my name." Her eyes swept over the faces, some defiant, some ashamed. "I forgive you. But forgiveness is not forgetting. The things you believe about people can destroy them. You must be sure your words are true before you speak them." There was silence. Even the wind seemed to have stopped to listen. David stepped forward then. He walked to a massive log lying near the center of the village. Without a word, he bent down and lifted it onto his shoulders. Gasps filled the air. Men who had spent their lives cutting wood had never lifted such a thing alone. "This is my son," Mary said, her voice steady. "His strength is not from spirits or curses. It is from surviving what you tried to destroy." She set her eyes on Elder John one last time, then turned and began walking toward the forest. Daniel and David followed. They did not look back. And in the village that had once cast her out, the people stood in silence, knowing that something stronger than shame had passed through their midst, and left them with the kind of truth that could never be burned away. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.